Hi, I'm Dr. Joel Kreisberg.
And I'm Reggie Mara, and we're here today to talk about the role of narrative health coaching and specifically how it applies in our class designing a client-specific coaching plan. So Joel, since you've just recently finished a section of that class, could you say a little bit about how narrative health coaching plays in to the class itself?
Yes, well, our approach is a learning approach. So, partly we set up the idea of a learning cycle, which is essentially to set, to seek, to apply, and to assess. Okay, and this all is a very abbreviated language of what the ICF calls facilitating learning and results. Okay, and specifically though, in the idea of a coaching program or coaching, we're interested in creating a coaching plan. So the components of a coaching plan are a healing topic,
Right.
learning objectives,
Okay.
growth practices, and then final assessment.
And so I understand that broad outline. Can you speak a little bit now to the specific role of what we're calling narrative health coaching and how that plays into the idea of the healing topic, the objectives, and the rest of that?
Good. So, a healing topic comes out of the idea of having a coaching topic. So the purpose of having a coaching topic, or which we call a healing topic, is to get really clear on what are the goals of the program and how do we manage those. You got to start by setting your goals. We like to call it a healing topic because it's not just I want to lose weight. It's actually more of a global orientation of understanding where I am, how I'm carrying myself, and then how to look at a salutogenic, at a way of bringing in increased health into the goals of our program. So at the end of our initial session, the goal of our plan is to create a healing topic, which is something that we work with our client to achieve.
So you mentioned the word salutogenic, which may not be familiar to everyone who's listening in. And I know that basically comes from the root of health orienting or health beginning. How does that play in to the coaching plan itself, and why is that important? Because I know that the opposite of that would be something we call pathogenic.
Yeah, it's actually really important because we have this arbitrary orientation toward paying attention to our illness, our disease. Often health coaching is coming to address problems that we're having. And so just because we haven't spent much time, we tend to want to get rid of our problem. So if we just say set goals and the goal is to get rid of our problem, we're actually not taking a more holistic approach. The holistic approach says, yeah, we do want to get rid of that pain or that anxiety or lose 20 pounds, but we want to see it as an opportunity for bringing something more into our life. So what is it that we'd like to see come in that would replace that particular problem? And so the process of finding a healing topic is one of which we engage the client in really an uncovering of what it is that they really want to see happen in their life.
Great. And so going back to the ICF core competencies, at the beginning we talked about facilitating learning and results, but also what you just described sounds as though the way into that, beyond just giving a client something to do or reaching a behavioral goal, is in fact around creating awareness. So the client can take this new awareness beyond any behavioral change,
right,
and move forward within the specific healing topic, but perhaps even beyond that once the coaching plan or the coaching relationship ends. Is that
exactly
fair?
No, I think that's exactly. I mean, I really appreciate that because in order to create, we're actually saying if we just leave it to coactively allowing the client to discover things, it may not arrive at really looking into what does it actually mean to what do you really want to see happen? Let's really look in that. Really look in a way that you might not have looked to before. And so that is actually a facilitative process. It requires direct communication. It requires asking powerful questions. And it's a very active approach where you're literally challenging the client to think in new ways and to discover for themselves what they may not have actually had thought about very much before. Often because what they're trying to get rid of takes center stage so much. Right.
Yeah, and so what I heard you touching on there, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper with this, if that's okay, is we've had some strong conversations and even experiences when we've talked together about the, I'll say, dichotomy or the differences between what some folks would call more directive coaching, where the coach takes a more directive or assertive role, and less directive coaching, or where a coach doesn't take any assertive role and just allows things to emerge as the client is able to come up with them.
Right.
And what I heard you refer to there was a different, maybe not a bias, but definitely a willingness to allow a coach to be more directive when in fact that's in the best interest of the client.
Right, what's interesting because we're definitely saying it's a do both move, right? And so, but it's saying that if we don't allow the coach to take a very active role at direct communication, which is one of the core competencies, but specifically ask the client to look at themselves in new ways, then we're actually missing a bunch of opportunity to really create a very powerful learning process for the client. So in order to be able to set correctly, I actually have to engage the client in a very active way. So I think of it, this is one of the challenges of our language, is when we're directive, we're active, and at the same time we are coactive in that we really want the client to find what's really meaningful for them. But it's not a passive role, it's actively engaged in more, I guess it's closer to like a ping pong or a tennis match, where in order to see the client has to learn new moves, you have to kind of to hit the ball slightly at the right level to push them a little bit to really try new muscles.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so the difference then would be being more directive or more assertive, again, in the service of the client, not telling. I think you and I agree that I've never told a client what he or she, to use that magic word, should do.
Right.
But to ask a question or to offer an insight that perhaps the client has not considered an answer to, or hasn't come to him or herself, is directive, but also allows the client to respond and say, "Wow, thanks, that's great. I never thought of that," or
right, exactly.
Or I'm not interested in that at all. Either
right.
one of them.
Well, and that's creating awareness. So creating awareness can be done by pure self-discovery, or it can become by the coach actually applying the right type of questioning and direct communication to bring that client to the point where they can make that discovery. Right, and that's a very sophisticated move, and that's key to narrative health coaching. And so you're starting to hear this word narrative health coaching, which many folks may not have heard before, and that's because in narrative health coaching we want to make sure that the behavioral outcomes and moves that are more traditional health coaching pays attention to also includes the client's story. Essentially, the client's mindset, the client's understanding of how they got there, what they're doing. And so the awareness is well, what am I really like when I'm doing that?
Yeah, and the coaching plan and the coaching relationship itself that allows the plan to unfold. In fact, and this is not to reduce it to this, but while it involves behavior change and some new learnings, ultimately is a chance for a client to revise his or her story about whatever the healing topic happened to be.
Exactly. So that's perfect segue. So the healing topic allows us to not just make the kind of behavioral change I need to sort of deal with that goal. It allows us to see it as a whole way of being, as a whole story, that if I change my story, if I take a new mindset, I can achieve my goal. Right, I can actually do healing, which is a whole nother conversation, and that's actually an interesting, we have another whole other class called narrative healing, where we address some of the ins and outs of that. And so then I end up with a healing topic, and then the thing is to create learning objectives. So this is where the coach, through listening really carefully to the client and doing something we call the health resource or the healing resource assessment, really actually kind of assesses where the strengths and weaknesses are in the client overall, in terms of there's a bunch of different pieces. That's a whole other conversation, what we do in the assessment, and then actually sets 3 learning objectives. If we can grow this particular skill, then I'll achieve my healing goal. my healing topic, essentially. So then once again, we do that coactively, but it really requires the coach to actually really understand how change occurs in individuals and how motivation may occur, and then sets those so that we can begin to apply it through coaching and growth practices.
And I just love the movement. I'm going to focus on the adjectives just for a moment, because we begin with a healing topic. So healing is the adjective there. And then we develop these learning objectives. So in order to heal, we want the client to learn something new or some things new. And the way we do that is through growth practices. So not just practices, but practices that are designed for growth. So I'm assuming that's no accident that we move through healing, to learning and growth.
Well, no, I appreciate that, because that's actually the approach that we're coming up with. And there are many ways of healing, just for the record. So we're not saying this is the only way to heal. I mean, medicines heal, and actually magic heals, and people have emotional healing, and all sorts of things happens. But one approach to healing is growing, right? I can grow new skills in order to see the problem differently, and then I can use myself in a new way, and then I don't necessarily have that issue so much anymore. Okay, so that's the approach that we're teaching in narrative health coaching. And then so we're at the third component, with this idea of growth practices, and we've recently started articulating what we mean by growth practices, because we like to say that you want to give the client an awareness practice. And the key to awareness practices and growth practices, this is where the client's doing the work, not in the coaching session. This is what they do when they go home, or the week in between, is that they take their awareness and they practice it. Okay, but we actually just recently started articulating the idea that you can have growth practices that have you work on the new behavior, or you can have growth practices that actually to explore how you understand yourself differently. And those are different emphasis of a growth practice, and both are necessary. So depending on where you are and what stage you are, you may spend more time trying to understand what I'm like when I'm doing that, like what I'm like when I'm eating unconsciously. How do I understand myself differently? Or I might actually have a practice which gets me to pay more attention to the way I'm eating, right? So the actual behavior. And both of those are valid and necessary in a narrative health coaching model.
Yeah, and both of those definitely will have an impact on the client's story. So to bring this, I guess, full circle, designing a client-specific coaching plan incorporates this healing topic, these learning objectives, these growth practices toward the end of moving a client forward. How would you complete that sentence?
Well, no, it's perfect, because you said, what's the impact? So in order to have the impact, you got to assess. Yep. Right, and that's the last piece. So you apply, and apply is real time. So you have to do that in the person's life. These are the practices. The growth practices, not go do something irrelevant. It's like when I'm my normal daily life, do something to learn, become aware. But then you have to assess, and the assessment is often part of the practice, but it's also part of the coaching, right, which we do in the session. Okay, and then ultimately that leads back to managing the progress for the client, and then resetting, right? So, using the ICF core competencies, managing progress and accountability is the process where we see how it went, what are you learning, and then we reset the growth practices, and then we cycle through learning, and we cycle through the learning objectives to achieve the healing topic. And we made it to the end.
Great.
So where this all is leading is that we're describing designing a client-specific coaching plan, which is a class that we teach at Teleosis Institute, and we're going to have a free 1-hour webinar coming up in a couple of weeks. And so if you'd like to really see this unpacked in the next level, we encourage you to join the free webinar. It will be similar to this quick conversation, but we'll get in more detail. But ultimately, this is what you learn in the class that we are offering at Teleosis Institute.
And I believe that that's actually March 15th at 4 p.m. On the West Coast and 7 p.m. on the East Coast.
So we hope that you will join us, and we're signing out. This is Joel Kreisberg.
And I'm Reggie Mara.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.